In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about working with QR codes inside of Bubble. Throughout this complete guide, I'm going to not only teach you how you can generate a QR code, but also how you can scan a QR code and build features on top of that. In our example today, I'm going to show you a real-world use case where we create a ticketing platform that not only generates a QR code whenever someone purchases a ticket, but we're also going to build out an additional feature that allows someone to scan that QR code when someone shows up to the event. Look, there's so much that I want to cover throughout this tutorial, so let's just grab our Bubble editor and we can dive right into it. Within my tutorial today, I'm going to be showing you how we can not only generate QR codes, but of course how we can also scan those inside of our application. Now, for the sake of our tutorial, what I've done is I've just created a checklist of all the items I want to include within my build. And this is something I personally like to do when it comes to any feature or full product I create using Bubble. I personally just use a tool called Notion, which just allows me to create an actionable checklist. So every single time I add an item into my app, what I can do is come back and check it off, so that way I can keep track of where I am throughout the build. Now, of course, I'll be sure to include a link to this checklist in the description of this video, so that way you can make a duplicate version of this and also follow along with me throughout the process. And within my tutorial today, for our specific use case, what I'm going to do is create almost like a ticketing website for events. In particular, it's going to focus on concerts. And so what we're going to do is create an experience that allows someone to purchase a ticket to a concert, from which will then generate a unique QR code for their ticket. And of course, when they show up to the gate on the day, we'll also create an experience that allows us to scan that QR code to validate that that is a genuine ticket. So let's just dive right ahead and jump into a Bubble editor. And at this point in time, I've already taken a moment to start building some of the application together. But of course, I'll be sure to run you through everything I've already created, so that way you can get a clear understanding of how I've set things up. The first thing I'd like to do though is just show you how I've set up my database to be able to support our QR code feature today. So if we jump over into my data tab, you'll see that I have three separate data types. Of course, by default, we're going to have a user data type within our application. And within this, I'm just including some fields like the user's name, their profile photo, and I have this field here which determines if they're an admin or not, and I have that set as a yes/no type with a default value of no. And now the purpose of this is because later on when I build out the feature to scan a QR code, I obviously only want that feature to be accessible to our admins of our application. So these can be the people who are like the security scanning tickets at your event, and so I don't want those features to be accessible to any old user. I want those only to be accessible to those who are an admin. I then have a data type which is known as our concert, and within this I just have some basic details about who the artist is, the cost of the ticket, the date, a featured image, and the venue itself. So nothing too important there. What I did want to point out though is under our ticket data type, this is where I have the supporting data field for our QR code. So for every ticket that is purchased, I'm going to want to store the details about who the attendee is. So I have this linked to our user data type. I also want to recognize what the concert is that this ticket was purchased for. So I have a field called concert, which is linked to our concert data type. I then have our main field, which is known as my QR image. So this is where we're going to be storing our QR code. So I have this field set as an image. So if you're wanting to create a QR code generation feature, you'll need a field which is set as an image. And then finally, I have a field which is known as the used. So this will just determine if the ticket's been used or not. And in this case, I have that set to be a yes/no type with once again a default value of no, because this ticket will not be used by default. It's only when it's marked as attended that I'll then want to switch this value to be yes. So that's how I've set up my database. As I mentioned, there's not too much involved in the process. The main thing you'll need to take away from this is that when you're creating a QR code, you'll need an image field under whatever data type you want to store that QR code for. Now, the other thing I should point out is that over in my design tab on my main page here, I have a repeating group that just displays a list of concerts within my database. So I'm just performing a search for all of my concerts. I don't have any constraints. And then within the repeating group, I'm just displaying the featured image of the concert. I then have another group, which inside of this includes the concert's details. So who the artist is, the date, the venue, and the price. And now all of these details are stored in a group, which is this red background you see here. When I'm creating an application in Bubble and I need to use a series of groups, what I personally like to do is give them a background color. So that way I can can easily see where they sit on the page. And then finally, I also have this button here, which is known as the buy ticket button. So of course, when this is clicked, what I'm going to want to do is create a new ticket in my database. And that is when we're going to generate the QR code itself for that ticket. So let's jump into the process of generating a QR code whenever a ticket is purchased. The first thing we'll need to do is install a free plugin. So we're going to jump over to our plugins tab. And now I already have this plugin pre-installed into my application. However, what you'll need to do is open up your plugin library and search for the barcode and QR code generator plugin. This is a free plugin to install. And what I love about this plugin is that you don't need to configure any API keys to make this functional. Everything you need to know is within the documentation here. So you can see a list of all of the events that this is capable of creating. In today's tutorial though, we're only interested in generating a QR code. And so that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So we're going to jump back over into our design tab once we have installed that plugin. And then what you'll see under your visual elements is a series of elements related to a QR code. And what I'd like to do is add in this element here known as the manual QR code generator. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to add this into my repeating group. And the reason why I'm adding this into my repeating group is because I'd like to link my QR code to a specific ticket. And that's going to be the ticket that's created whenever this button is clicked for a specific concert. So that's why I've added this element into my repeating group. While I'm working on this element, what I am going to do is just update the background style of this to be a flat color. And I can make this a light shade of red, just so once again, I can actually see where this element sits on my page. But one thing I should point out about this element is that it's not really going to be visible to your users on your page anyway. So if you really wanted, you could set the layout of this element to be 1 pixel by 1 pixel. So that way it doesn't take up any space on your page. For the sake of our tutorial though, I am just going to keep this as 50 by 50. I'm also going to move this to the last position within our repeating group cell and just vertically align that in the center. So again, just to reiterate, this element doesn't actually serve a purpose in displaying anything to users on your page. It's purely just on our page so we can reference this element when we want to generate a QR code. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So let's say a user sees a concert that they'd like to buy a ticket to. What they're going to do is click on this buy ticket button and I'm going to choose to start a workflow. And then within this workflow, the first thing I want to do is create a new ticket in my database, which is just for my own use case with my concert platform. So what I'm going to do is head to my data tab. I'll create a new thing. I'll just create a new ticket. And the two fields I want to store is first of all, who the attendee is, and then what the concert is that they're purchasing a ticket for. So for the attendee, this is just going to be the current user. So the person who's logged in and is purchasing a ticket. And the concert will just be the current sales concert. It's as simple as that. Then after I create a new ticket in my database, what I'd like to do is generate a QR code that I'm going to attach to this ticket. And so this is where we can reference the QR code element that we've added onto our page. So I'm going to add an additional step within my workflow here. I'm going to head on down to my element actions. And what you'll see is an option to generate a manual QR code generator, which is what's going to allow us to generate the QR code for our ticket. And what you'll see within this step of our workflow is that we need to link a source of data to this QR code. So this is the information that's going to be stored within the QR code itself. And in my use case today, within our QR code, what I'd like to do is store the unique ID of each ticket that is created. So that way, when someone scans this QR code, it's going to take them through to a dedicated ticket page that displays the detail of that specific ticket. But let's say if you were building in another use case, a QR code app that will just store the link of a website, what you could do is dynamically insert the link of the website you want to send someone through to. So this is where you'll need to actually store the data of the QR code itself, because this data here will determine whatever the destination page is when someone scans a QR code in the future. And so for the data I'm going to store within my ticket today, as I mentioned, I want this to be the unique ID of the ticket that I've just generated. So I'm going to insert dynamic data and I'm going to reference the result of step 1. And if I scroll right down to the bottom, I'm going to reference its unique ID. And now this step of our workflow is going to generate a brand new QR code. But what I'll need to do is link that QR code back to our ticket. And the way we'll need to do this is by creating a completely separate workflow. So whenever we generate a QR code, we don't actually know how long it's going to take for that QR code to generate. That of course will be dependent on a multitude of different things. So how fast your application is, what kind of data you're trying to store within the QR code. And so what you'll see within the plugin we've installed is that you can create a separate workflow from scratch. And if you head on down to your element actions, you can create a brand new trigger that's going to run every single time a QR code has finished generating. So I'm going to click on this workflow trigger, and this will be linked to the QR code element we've added onto our page. So essentially this workflow is going to pick up where our first workflow left off. So we're going to create a ticket, we're going to generate that QR code, and then once that QR code has finished generating, this workflow will kick in. And now what I'd like to do is save the information of that QR code onto our ticket. So what I'm going to do is choose to head to our data tab, and I'll select to make changes to a thing. And as I just mentioned, the thing I'd like to change is going to be the ticket that I've just created. But because these are two separate workflows, I have no direct way of referencing the specific ticket. So what I'll need to do is perform a search in my database for that ticket. So I'm going to perform a search in my database for the ticket where the attendee equals the same value as the current user. So that's the person who's logged in and has just purchased that ticket. And where the concert equals the same value as the current sales concert. So that is the concert that our QR code element sits within. And of course, because one person will only buy one ticket to this specific concert, what I'm going to do is recognize the first and only item in our database, from which I can then update the QR code image field. And I'd like to have this store the information of this manual QR code generator, its image URL. So that's now going to store the value of the QR code that you'll actually see and display on our ticket page. And so that's exactly how we can generate a QR code and save that in our database. The very last thing I'd like to do is redirect someone through to a dedicated page where they can see their actual ticket for this concert, which of course will display the image of the QR code itself. And so in my application here today, I have a dedicated page which is known as my ticket page. And so on this page, I'll just quickly run you through how I've set this up. I've set the page to be the dimensions of a mobile device because someone's going to obviously carry their mobile into a concert. They're not going to carry their laptop. And on this page, I've just set a type of content to be a ticket because I'd like to dynamically display the information of a ticket on this page. And then from here, I have an image element, which is going to display the profile photo of the person who purchased this ticket. I've got the ticket holder's name. So it's the current page ticket, the attendee's name. And then I have some information about who the concert artist is, as well as the concert venue and the date of this concert. And then finally, I have an image element on my page, which is just referencing the current page ticket, the QR code image. And so what I'd like to do is redirect someone through to this page once they've purchased a ticket. So if I just jump back to my original concert page, open up my workflow tab and select the workflow that I've just finished working on. So where I'm storing the QR code within my database. What I'd like to do is select from the navigation event and choose the go to page action. And in this case, I'm going to send someone through to our dedicated ticket page. Then because I have a type of content stored on that page to be a ticket, I'll need to send through the information of which specific ticket I want to show. So for the data I'll send through, this is just going to be the result of step 1, which is the ticket I'd referenced that I'd already made changes to. And so at this point, we have now successfully generated a QR code. And so what I want to do is just show you a quick preview of how that's actually going to function. Over in a preview of my app, I'm currently logged in as a test user that I have. And let's say I want to buy a ticket to the Coldplay concert here. What I'm going to do is click this button. That workflow is going to run. It's going to not only create that ticket in my database, but it's also going to create that QR code, from which once that's finished generating, it's going to save the QR code to my ticket. And now, as you can see, we've been redirected through to our dedicated ticket page and our QR code has successfully been displayed on it. So from here, what I'm going to do is quickly just jump back into my Notion checklist and tick off that we've finished walking through all of the features to generate a dynamic QR code. But of course, today I'm also here to teach you how you can actually scan that QR code. And so what we're going to do is jump right back into Bubble, and we're going to need to install a separate plugin yet again. So if we jump over to our plugin tab here, you'll see that I've already installed a plugin known as the QR code scanner. Now this is another free plugin you can use. So you'll need to open up your plugin library, search for this plugin and install this. Then once you've installed this, we'll jump back into our design tab. And what I've actually done is I've created a dedicated page, which is known as my concert dashboard. And the sole purpose of this page is to create a feature that allows our security at the event to actually scan people's tickets. And then of course, I'll show you how we can mark those tickets as attended. So that way we have a way to determine who actually attended the concert. And to give you a breakdown of how I've created this page here, it just has two simple elements on it. The first element is known as our QR code scanner. So this is the element you'll see on our page once you've installed the second plugin. And so all you'll need to do is just add this plugin onto your page anywhere. And to be honest, I haven't changed any of the settings for this element. I've left it as the default size. The only thing I did is obviously center that inside of my page. But once I'd added that in, what I'd also done is added a button below this. Just because when this button is clicked, what I'd like to do is trigger a workflow. So if I click into this button, what you'll see is that I've created a workflow that starts our QR code scanner. So this will actually open up the QR code reader and allow us to scan a QR code. And if you want to find out where that workflow action is, all you need to do is head down to your element actions, and you'll now see the option to start a QR code scanner. So that is the exact action I had selected. But of course, we'll also need to create a separate workflow that runs whenever our QR code scanner actually picks up a valid QR code. And so what I've done is created another workflow from scratch here. And this workflow trigger recognizes when our QR code scanner element has successfully picked up data. So that is the initial data we'd actually stored in the QR code itself, which if you remember, I'd stored the unique ID of our ticket. And if you want to source the same workflow trigger, all you'll need to do is create a brand new workflow from scratch, head to your element actions, and just recognize when the QR code scanner has data. And within this workflow, all I've simply done is I've created a navigation event, which is going to redirect us through to the ticket page, and of course, send through the data of the specific ticket that they've just scanned. So if I open up this workflow action, I've set the destination page to be my ticket page. And because that page has a content type of a ticket, I'll of course need to send a ticket to that page. And in order to source that specific ticket, what I've done is I performed a search through my database for all of the tickets where the unique ID of that ticket is the same unique ID extracted from my QR code. So if I was to build this again from scratch, I would just scroll on down and source the unique ID, and I would reference this QR code scanner, its QR code content. And as I just mentioned before, the content is the data stored in the QR code itself. So I'm just going to delete this duplicate here. And as you can see, I'm just referencing the first and only item where the unique ID is the same as the unique ID on our ticket. So in this case, it would successfully redirect us through to that ticket page. But of course, what I'd like to now do is create a feature that allows us as a security guard at the event or even an admin to mark this ticket as used. So if I jump back over to my dedicated ticket page and open up my design tab here, what I've done is I've actually jumped ahead and I've added some hidden elements on my page. So I have this button here, which just displays the words marked as attended, as well as a text element that displays the status of this ticket. So if you remember in our database, I had my ticket data type, and within this data type, I had a field known as used, which was a yes/no value with a default value set to no. And so all I've done here is I've created a text element that just references the current page ticket, its used status. So if this ticket hasn't been used, this will just say no. And if it has been used, it will say yes. So that way we know that this person's already claimed this ticket. So if someone else is trying to claim it, we won't let them into the event. Now for both of these elements, I've jumped into my layout tab and I've unselected that these should be visible on page load. I've also selected to collapse these when they're hidden, which means that by default, these elements are not visible to anyone. And so what I'm going to need to do is create a condition that recognizes when I should in fact display these elements to our admin users. So I've created a condition for both of these elements, and I've just recognized when the current user, when their admin status. So this was the data field known as admin in my database. When it is in fact yes, meaning that someone is an admin user, I've selected that this element is visible and I've ticked that that should be true. And look, I've done the exact same thing for my button here. So both of these elements will now only be visible to the admins of our application. And finally, what I've done is I've created a workflow whenever this button is clicked, which just updates the status of the ticket itself. So if I select my mark as attended button, I'll open up my workflow here. And what you'll see I've done is I've created a workflow step that makes changes to the current page ticket, in which case I've now marked the use status as yes. And then finally, I've just added another step in my workflow, which is just a simple navigation event. and I've sent someone back through to our concert dashboard, which means that the admin or security guard will just be redirected back through to the page where they can scan another ticket. And so that's everything we'll need to create when it comes to actually scanning a ticket. What I'd love to do though is of course show you a preview of how this is going to function. And I'm actually going to do this on my mobile device. So I'm going to jump back into the preview I'd shown you before where I had purchased a ticket and it had generated a QR code. I'm going to refresh my page here, and then over on a mobile device, I'm going to log in as an admin on my concert dashboard page. Now, just as a side note, I personally recommend trying to use Safari as the browser of choice when you're previewing the actual ticket scanning feature. And today you'll see on my mobile device that I am logged into a Safari browser. So what I'm going to do from here is click on the scan ticket button. I'm going to allow this access to my camera. And then what you'll see is our QR code scanner will open. When I then hover this over our QR code on the ticket, it's going to redirect us through to the same ticket page that the user is currently showing us. Only of course, because we're an admin, we'll be able to see the status of this ticket. So I can see that the ticket has not been used. And so what I'm going to do is click on the mark as attended button. It will update that status, and it's then going to redirect us back through to our concert dashboard page. So that way we can go ahead and scan another ticket. Just jumping back into my Notion checklist, we can then tick off that we've finished building out the feature to scan a QR code. And of course, I'd explain how we could integrate that into our ticketing platform. So that way we could easily update the status of the actual ticket itself in our database. And just like that, you can see how easy it is to start integrating a QR code feature into your own Bubble app. Of course, without having to write a single line of code. Today I've just shown you one example of what's possible, but of course, like anything in Bubble, there truly is no limit to what you can create. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to stay up to date with any other Bubble tutorials I share, be sure to hit that subscribe button on my channel, so that way you can be the first to know whenever I drop a new tutorial. In the meantime though, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for taking the time to watch this tutorial, and I wish you all of the best on your own no-code journey.